Warning! This video contains language and subject material that may be absolutely, definitely, probably inappropriate for children. Marvelous hello, friends and loved ones, and welcome back to what has become one of my favorite traditions on this channel, Saintstember, where I cover all of the mainline Saints Row games throughout Septembers. And with this being the third year, I'm naturally going to be looking at Saints Row the Third, which I am absolutely going to be calling Saints Row 3 throughout the rest of this video because it's so much easier and because that's what the hat says. I also want to mention real quick that while I did play the first two games on the Xbox 360, and that is where I've mostly played Saints Row the Third, for this video I actually went ahead and played Saints Row the Third Remastered on the PS4. Plus, when you play the PlayStation 4 version, the light on the controller is all purpley. Woo, purpley! Now, before I actually start talking about Saints Row 3, I want to quickly address what happened between the ending of Saints Row 2 and the release of this game. As you may remember from last year's video, the Saints Row 2 DLC ended with Playa chasing Dex out of Stillwater. And you might know that Saints Row 3 takes place in a new city. But these events are not connected in the way that you'd naturally expect. In fact, as far as I know, Dex is not mentioned in any capacity in Saints Row 3, and that's because of a spin-off game called Saints Row Money Shot. I won't focus too much on this subject, but basically, Money Shot was a planned Xbox Live Arcade and PSN game where you play as Cypher, an assassin working for Ultor. And using her specialized sniper rifle, you take control of her bullets and assassinate targets. The game looked sort of like an auto-runner puzzle-type game where you controlled the bullet flying in slow motion, and once you assassinated your target, you'd get a replay where you could see the effects of certain other things that you hit during the rest of the level. And one of those levels had Cypher assassinate the man himself, Dex, during his birthday party. So basically, the canonical end of Dex's life happens in a digital-only spin-off title that never actually came out. If you want to learn more about Money Shot, Mr. Saints Godzilla 21 did an in-depth video on it a few years ago, and I've included a link to that in the description below. Alright, so if we're not chasing after Dex, what are we doing? Since the end of Saints Row 2, the Saints have built themselves a brand empire thanks to their Ultor connections, and they have their own clothing lines, and comic books, and probably like lunchboxes or something. But we are still criminals, so things start off with a bank job that quickly goes south. Playa, Johnny Gat, Shandy, and the other guy robbed a bank belonging to snooty McFrenchman Philippe Laurent.
Please, I am Belgian.
Whatever. And he's the boss of an organization called the Syndicate, which comprises 3 gangs that control Steelport, our new city, and, get used to this place. However, on the escape mission out of Laurent's airplane, the unthinkable happens.
Johnny, we're about to jump!
Right on. I'll see you in Still.
Johnny?
That's right. Johnny Gat is dead. And we are never going to see him. Ever. Again. No. Nope. I'm sorry. I can't say it with a straight face. Now, truth be told, I actually really like how they handled the setup here. The Saints basically grew soft with their celebrity lifestyle, and killing off a beloved character and stranding the remaining Saints in a new city with no money and no connections is a great way of bringing them back down to square one and needing to rebuild their empire once more. It's a good premise. Until, like, the third mission of the game, where you use a helicopter to take over a penthouse suite, and then it basically just feels like you're already back on top. Oh yeah, and I should probably also address my playa. See, I've always played the Saints Row games with a sense of progression to my character. In the first game, he wore street-level, typical kind of gangster clothes with hoodies and whatnot. In Saints Row 2, I like to keep things business casual. And in Saints Row 3, I like to go full comic book villain. Which means now his face full of piercings are all gold, and yes, I kept the British accent.
A fucking tiger?
If you're fighting the luchadors, you need to be ready for anything.
A fucking tiger?
But I feel like I should also mention that one of his voice options is Kanji Tatsumi.
These kids with their video games. When I was their age, I spent my time outside, murdering people in the fresh air.
Alright, so now we're in Steelport, and I just don't like it as much as Stillwater. I feel like I need to get that out of the way right now. Steelport is clearly more of an industry city, like Pittsburgh or something, and it does do a really good job of capturing that vibe, but I just never felt as connected to the environment like I did in Stillwater. That's not to say Steelport doesn't have a few interesting city spots to find, it's just fine. Though I will say, I'm happy so long as I can still ride around on my
motorcycles.
Motorcycles!
Motorcycles. Motorcycles.
Motorcycle!
Motorcycles.
Motorcycles.
Motorcycle!
Let's also take a look at our gangs here. Like I said, all three of them operate under the Syndicate, but we can break it down a bit more than that. Philippe Laurent and his personal assistants, the De Winter sisters, run the Morning Star, who wear red and mostly seem to handle the sex trade in Steelport. Then you've got the Deckers, run by Matt Miller, who is our second gang leader in the series, voiced by Yuri Lowenthal.
Ladies, it was a pretty shit plan.
These are a bunch of neo-cyberpunk hackers decked out in blue lights. And lastly, there's the Luchadors, who wear luchador masks and are mostly green, and their leader, Eddie.
What did you call me?
Right, sorry, Killbane. Now, one of the major differences between the earlier Saints Row games and this one is that you no longer take the gangs down by doing missions specifically related to them. Saints Row 3 is a lot more linear, which isn't inherently a bad thing, but I do have some issues with how they handled a few things. I already mentioned how quickly we take over a penthouse, but you basically kill Laurent like 2 hours into the game, and it's a little anticlimactic. What made death in Saints Row 2 so much better is that most of the deaths were either interesting or impactful. I was invested in who these characters were and how their deaths affected the actions and motivations of those around them. Most of the deaths in Saints Row 3 just kinda happen. I'm not saying I need every single death in this game to be emotionally draining or narratively poignant, but I feel like some of them should be. As a reminder, they killed a fan-favorite character off-screen. Alright, so basically those first few hours to kill Laurent were essentially just the first act of our main story. It's actually after this that things start to pick up. The Saints briefly return to Stillwater for Johnny's funeral, but are attacked by the Luchadors and end up pissing off Senator Monica Hughes, who has definitely been drinking her MILF juice since the last game. Back in Steelport, Playa decides we need to canonize some new Saints, and this is where we're introduced to most of our new members. The first one we meet is actually during the attack on Laurent's stronghold, and that's the genius muscular gentleman Oleg, who is probably my favorite new character. The Syndicate was cloning him to make these powerful brute enemies who are strong but lack Oleg's intelligence. He's just a fun character, and there's a really nice running gag of him playing chess with Pierce that I really like.
Pack it up, we gotta move.
I got 20K on this game. Damn!
Now it's your draw. You got the stuff, Pierce?
Allow me, friend.
You did that on purpose.
So who's winning? What's that?
God damn it!
Next up is former FBI agent Kinsey Kensington, who helps you defeat the computer-savvy Deckers, and she's Futaba.
You should be more careful. I saw you coming 2 blocks ago. Traffic cameras. They're everywhere in this town.
Good to know.
I'm serious. You should toss out your fancy overpriced phone. I can find you through that too.
Like, I know this game came out first, but seriously, she's basically Futaba. In fact, I'm pretty sure if this character was made now, they probably would have just gotten Erica Lindbeck to voice her. Speaking of Erica Lindbeck, I should take a moment to address this is the first Saintstember since the release of the Saints Row reboot. And Erica actually provides one of the voice options for Boss, who, in my file, I made as this wacky purple mascot.
I don't know, a ball pit?
I'm joking. I'm kinda joking.
I'll talk about this game another year. Then there's Zemos, a veteran player in prostitution rings who has an auto-tune microphone for his stoma.
Oh, I'm here to help, baby. I know every track the Morning Star are working. We can build up our stable and hurt the DeWinter sisters at the same time.
He does have a couple of missions to help you take down the Morning Star, but honestly, he doesn't really do a whole lot in the plot. He's an old man, so he needs a lot of rest. Then lastly, there's Angel de la Muerte, a former luchador who lost his mask in a match against Killbane, and joins up with the Saints for revenge and to reclaim his purpose in life. Most of these new characters are fine enough. Oleg and Kinsey are probably my favorites. For returning characters, with Johnny dead, Pierce kinda takes over the right-hand man role, and he's fun enough. He's still the butt of a lot of the jokes, but I do like him in this game. Shadia sucks in Saints Row 3. In the last game, she was one of my favorite characters. Sure, she was a lazy stoner hippie, but she was also the brains of the group. She was one of their main sources of intel because she always knew a guy, and she was an integral part in taking down some of these gangs. In Saints Row 3, her personality is basically being mad all the time, being needlessly catty towards Kinsey in a way that does not feel organic, and getting kidnapped, which I know she did in the last game, but still, she's basically not even the same person anymore, which is not helped by her looking completely different and having a new voice actor, to the point where honestly, she may as well just not be the same character. Now, in this part of the game, when you're doing missions for all the different Saints, is where the game does break up the linearity a little bit. However, a large chunk of the missions you do for these characters are basically just tutorials for what used to be side activities. You know, things like insurance fraud, mayhem, and escort are now at least partially mandatory in the story. So whether you want to or not, you'll be doing basically every activity at least once. This is actually one of my biggest complaints with Saints Row 3. In the previous games, there was always some sort of context for why you were doing these side hustles. We got to meet great characters through these cutscenes, like Tobias and Mr. Wong. Now the context is because one of the Saints told you to do it, and any other instances of the same activity offer no story at all. You don't even need to do the activities to earn respect in order to do story missions anymore, since now respect acts more like a level-up system and you can buy upgrades for yourself. Upgrades that would often be rewards for completing activities. Now they basically just exist for the purposes of city takeover, and I'll be honest, I never really felt the need to do them, which was really disappointing. They also removed a lot of the activities, like Septic Avenger, Fuzz, Crowd Control, and Fight Club. They did add Professor Genki's Super Ethical Reality Climax, which is an ultra-violent Japanese game show that is kinda fun, but again, it feels a little bit more hollow without the cutscene telling us why we're taking the time to take part in it. But speaking of Professor Genki, now feels like a good time to address the flying pink elephant in the room farting glitter and drinking flaming Everclears. Saints Row 3 is where the series got wacky. Sure, the previous games had moments of being over the top, but this game tries to fluctuate so hard between normal story and over-the-top nonsense that it feels a little bit all over the place. Like, okay, we recruited everybody through fairly normal means and connections and breaking up gang activity. Now we have to go defeat Matt Miller in a virtual reality and have a dramatic dragon fight. Oh yeah, and by the way, there's also a militia called Stag that shows up with super technology because of that earlier thing with Senator Hughes. Man, why does Stag hate me so much?
Let me tell you about Jessica Parrish, a girl from Stillwater who ran away from home to be with her tough guy boyfriend. Jessica thought her life was pretty sweet until a gangbanger kidnapped her, threw her in the trunk of a car, and laughed as her boyfriend crushed her in a monster truck rally.
I did do that. Yeah. But it's okay, because I have a Mega Man Buster Cannon and a shotgun that summons sharks. I actually really love this thing. Oh yeah, and I also have that weapon, but I won't be using it because I am not risking making YouTube mad at me. Also, like, zombies are just here at some point. Yeah, there's a whole thing with zombies. And look, I get zombies have been in the series before, but...
Usually they're on my side.
What?
Nothing.
You know what? I'm gonna give them that one. My point is that sometimes Saints Row 3 feels like it's trying so hard to one-up itself that it forgets to make any of these things meaningful in a way where I'm actually invested. Honestly, after spending so much time fighting the tech-heavy military group, I honestly forgot that I still had to fight Killbane, which is a good time to talk about one thing in this game I do genuinely love: the choices. Throughout some of these missions, Playa is given a choice on what to do. These are typically two options that do not affect the plot, but they have their own unique rewards, and the game does tell you which one is going to do what. I'm a big fan of this, and generally felt good about my choices, whether it was yanking off Killbane's mask at Murder Brawl, or letting Oleg study the zombie serum. The actual finale is the only choice you make that really affects things. Without going into too much detail, do you rescue your friends and protect the Saints' reputation while Killbane escapes, or do you chase after him and kill him, but at what cost? For the record, the first one is considered the canon ending, so that's the one I chose to do. Now don't worry if you think that sounds a little anticlimactic. I promise you, we do still get to take down Killbane in a realistic, grounded climax. Now, because I'm playing the remastered version, I've also got access to all of the DLC, which includes 3 pretty interesting little mini-packs. There's Genki Bowl 7, which actually does offer some of that sweet activity context I wanted earlier, where Playa is invited to take part in some super Genkified activities, like crushing things with a ball of yarn, or this horrible skydiving game. Oh yeah, and I also decided to be a toilet for these missions, because I can be a toilet. Then there's Gangsters in Space, where Playa gets to film a movie based on Johnny Gat's comic book. I actually really liked this story because Playa is a horrible actor, and the director keeps treating your super sweet co-star like crap.
You had the emotional range of a bagel. And like one of those shitty whole grain bagels that nobody likes.
Until she gets so fed up that she crashes a spaceship into him. It's cheesy, it's funny, and you get a hot purple alien babe as a homie. I liked this pack. Then there's The Trouble with Clones, where Jimmy, a fan of the Saints, tried to clone Johnny Gat, and ends up creating a hulking beast called Johnny Tag. These are also pretty fun missions, and I actually really enjoyed what little we got to see of Tag and Playa interacting.
Come on, buddy. Let's get you back home.
Stripper pole?
That's right, man. Stripper pole.
However, I do have to take away a couple of points because these missions give you a gun that shoots bees, and they don't let you keep it! Maybe I should have prefaced this earlier in the video, but I want to make one thing clear. I do like Saints Row 3. It may have sounded like I didn't because of all the words I said in this video kind of implying that, but I do still think this game is fun. I had a great time playing through it again for this video. The game is still enjoyable, but I just thought Saints Row 2 was better. And a lot of the things I found myself wishing were in this game were things that 2 already did. Now, before I go, there is one thing I have to get out of the way. I have to explain this because I have felt this is the case for years. Saints Row the Third is Shrek 2. Now, hear me out. Our established gang travels far, far away. We've got a violent protagonist with an accent, assuming you gave him one. They have a comic relief right-hand man. The fairly competent badass woman from the last one is now mostly relegated to being angry and occasionally fending off the advances of a scummy pretty boy. We team up with a killer cat mascot. There are random celebrity cameos.
Burt fucking Reynolds?
Who else could keep this town running?
There's a dramatic showdown set to Bonnie Tyler's holding out for a hero that is way more awesome than it has any right to be. And they're both the best in their respective series. Oh. Okay, so it's not a perfect metaphor. And that just about does it for Saints Row the Third. Now, I do think it's a step down from Saints Row 2, but this is still a really good game that is well worth playing through for any fans of the series. That is going to wrap things up for this year's Saintstember, and I will see you next year when I look at Saints Row 4. Because that's how numbers work.
Wow. So, guess that's a wrap.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching my video. If you liked it, be sure to click like, but if you really liked it, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future videos. Extra special thanks to all my friends and loved ones over on Patreon, which you can pledge to today to see your own name in these ending credits. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, take care.